It's the black guy in the corner, but they'd rather see a on the corner. They say I'm stealing Nick's clips like I'm stealing Nick's chick, not knowing that I hit him first week for the lick. I said, Nick, I could post here while you post there. Let's run the ads up, then let's meet up over there.
I want to move on to the theory that Israel was somehow involved. I'm going to be upfront with you. I find this to be unconvincing, and I will explain in rigorous detail why. When we implicate Israel, or I should say, when Israel implicates itself in various conspiracies, there's usually a reason why. I believe fully that Israel was involved, and the organized Jewish community was involved in many of the great conspiracies of the past 200 years. And I could tell you in one sentence why for each of them. I don't look at a crisis or a tragedy and assume that Israel did it. Contrary to what people like Ben Shapiro say, that I trip on my shoelaces and blame the Jews, I don't rush to judgment and think that Israel is behind every crisis or every disaster or anything. I do believe that Israel was involved in JFK's assassination. Why? Because Lee Harvey Oswald had CIA handlers. James Angleton was running that team of handlers. Many of them were Jewish. And James Angleton is mourned in Israel. He managed the Israeli desk at the CIA. He traded U.S. nuclear secrets to Israel for intelligence on the Soviet Union. Jack Ruby, a Jewish mobster connected to Meyer Lansky that ran guns to Israel, killed Lee Harvey Oswald. Why do I think Israel was involved? That's why. How about the USS Liberty? Well, Israeli fighter jets blew up the ship to cover up their activities in the Six-Day War in 1967. Enough said. And 9/11, why do we believe Israel was involved? Because they were arrested on 9/11. Because a 911 call was placed, and according to FOIA requests, at least 4, but up to 6 Israeli intelligence operatives were arrested filming the towers collapsing in free fall, apparently with prior knowledge of the attack. And later in the day, Urban Moving Systems was apprehended by police with explosives in their van, and they were released without any incident. When we look at just a survey of the biggest conspiracies of the past 70 years, these are just 3. There's always a connection. We don't start with Israel did it, now here's how we can make it work. We start with the evidence. And we survey the evidence, and if we can find a motive, and if we can find a connection, then we can plausibly create a conjecture or postulate that Israel might be involved. What was Israel's motive in JFK? He was going to deprive them of their nuclear capability. What's the connection? James Angleton, Jack Ruby, enough said. USS Liberty, what was their motive? Conceal their maneuvering in the Six-Day War. What was the connection? Well, they blew up the ship. Enough said. They blew up the ship. Enough said. 9/11, what was the motive? Get America into Iraq, and then Syria, and then Iran, and everywhere. What was the connection? They were dancing. You had thousands of art students apprehended in federal government buildings. Went to war the next day. The war plans were on Bush's desk the day before. Enough said. But this is why I'm skeptical about Charlie Kirk. I said on Thursday that I didn't like Charlie Kirk. He was my opponent. A lot of people that have never seen my show before said, why was Charlie Kirk your opponent? Well, 6 years ago, I had my first interaction with Charlie Kirk in 2019. In the summer of 2019, I was banned from speaking at any Turning Point USA chapter or any Turning Point USA event. I didn't know why. I attended a party with Ashley St. Clair in September of 2019. I took a photo with her. She was a Turning Point ambassador at that time. When Turning Point caught wind that she was in a photograph with me, they terminated her from the ambassador program. I attended the Politicon event in, I believe, October 2019. I was physically removed from the event by a dozen police officers at the behest of Charlie Kirk. I had no idea why. In 2019, my followers began to attend Charlie Kirk's Q&A sessions at his college tour. We were much younger back then. He was younger, I was younger. It was 6 years ago, almost to the day. And my followers would approach Charlie Kirk and ask questions like, Google dancing Israelis. Why did Israel blow up the USS Liberty? They would say, should it be America first or Israel first? And they would press Charlie Kirk, among other things, on why he supported Israel. Now, in 2019, there was a very different Charlie Kirk than there is in 2025. In 2019, Charlie Kirk visited Israel and said he loved the food, the people, he wore the hat, he kissed the wall. In 2019, he went to donor events and said that, you know, the people, the land in America, they really mean nothing. America's about the Constitution. And if you gave a desert island with a desert island population the Constitution, that would be America. He said, but Israel's different. Their land, their people is holy and sacred, and their nationalism must be respected. This is what mainstream conservatism was in 2019. And there were very few people pushing back against it. I was one of them. Michelle Malkin was another. The Groypers led the charge in the Groyper War. And the Groyper War, unlike these far-left people or others, was a war of ideas. Our greatest aspiration, maybe my greatest professional aspiration for the past 6 years, was to debate Charlie Kirk, to confront him in a debate on this issue in particular. That was my grievance with Charlie Kirk. And for years, my perception of him, and this was also the reality, is that although I believe his heart was in the right place, and I think that he was the defender of the truth on some other issues, or came to be a defender of the truth on other issues, I do believe that he was complicit in the Israeli capture of the right wing for a very long time. And that is unfortunately just the truth. And as much as we can grieve and as much as we can mourn and we can say that obviously he did not deserve what happened to him, we cannot fall into the trap of creating a mythology that does not reflect reality. It is true that for year after year, Turning Point USA grew and grew with sponsorship from Israeli, pro-Israel, Jewish, Zionist donors. And they did this because Turning Point USA was an extremely pro-Israel organization. And anybody that has ever been in Turning Point USA will tell you that same thing. They give you a box of stickers and buttons and posters, and many of them say things like, socialism sucks, and enjoy capitalism. And many of them say, support Israel. Many of them say, I heart Israel. And as we all know, Turning Point USA was part of the conservative activist enterprise, which was funded to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars by Jewish donors to indoctrinate young American conservatives with a pro-Israel ideology, alongside Prager University, alongside Daily Wire, alongside many other similar projects. That's the pretext under which it was founded with Foster Fries's money. And that's how it was right up until last week and to today. So this is why I say I find it very unconvincing and very unlikely that Israel killed Charlie Kirk. And the reason why I find it almost ridiculous is, as I said, because for the past 6 years, that has actually been the cleavage issue. That has been the subject that I have fought Charlie Kirk and Turning Point USA on for the better part of my career, for nearly a decade. That is why I was not permitted into his events. That is why he refused to debate me. That is why he characterized me as a bad faith troll, among other things. That was the reason for our initial conflict. And I don't want to relitigate all of it, but this has become the subject of careful scrutiny. There is a question now. Who killed this man? Was it his enemies on the left? Was it his enemies on the right? Was it his enemies closest to him, perhaps the Zionist donors? I don't say any of this for any reason. Obviously, dead men tell no tales. I do not say this to speak ill of the dead. I do not say this to get my 2 cents in. I say this for the record. This is the record of history. That was our ideological and professional conflict. That was our feud. And the tragedy on Wednesday, it doesn't change that history. That was the basis for it. So to me, it is very unlikely that the Israelis had it out for him because, well, why would they? Charlie Kirk was a steadfast ally of Israel for his entire career. Charlie Kirk was pro-Israel explicitly, publicly, steadfastly for years, right up until his death. That is the sober and realistic fact. So the question is, why does everybody believe that Israel was implicated last week? Well, there is a narrative that has been promulgated that Charlie Kirk was on the verge of a great conversion. The narrative is, in light of the record of history and where Charlie Kirk was in his journey, the argument goes that this year, recently, in response to recent developments like the turning of Candace Owens, the turning of Tucker Carlson, the genocide in Gaza, and the beating of the war drums in Iran, that Charlie Kirk was undergoing a change of heart, and that there was an interior and a private struggle, that Charlie Kirk was changing his mind, and as a result, he was chafing with his Jewish donors. There was a tension. He was created by Jewish donors. He was funded by Jewish donors. Jewish donors were his patrons. And so the story goes, like many of us, we are all in a different place in our journey, and some have awakened later than others. Charlie Kirk, like anybody, was discovering the truth. And he was having a faith awakening, maybe converting to Catholicism, recognizing the tension between religious Judaism and Christianity, or the brutality in Gaza with the tenets of the gospel. And also an ideological conversion, realizing that a Israeli capture of American foreign policy is in complete contravention of an America First foreign policy, which he advocates for. And so the story goes, Charlie Kirk was changing his mind on these issues. He was expressing it privately. He was telegraphing or signaling that the ship would be righted and that he was beginning to resist the most zealous, fanatical, demanding Israel First donors. And the prospect of someone so powerful like Charlie Kirk, particularly among the young right-wing conservatives of America, it was too much of a risk for Israel to tolerate. So they took him out. Before he could leave the pro-Israel plantation and take all the young conservatives with him, the story goes that they eliminated him and perhaps set up somebody like Ben Shapiro to take his place. So that when the false flag occurs, and it will, you hope it doesn't, but it looks likely, when the call for a war in Iran becomes deafening, they will have someone reliable, someone predictable, someone that they have certainty. Why take a chance? Someone that they are certain will toe the line and push America and its youth to support a war. That's the story. Now, what is the evidence for this narrative? Well, there are some public examples. There is a video from October 2023, 2 years ago, where Charlie Kirk takes out his frustration at secular Jewish donors that support left-wing causes like mass immigration and social liberal causes. And then they expect that young white conservatives will turn around and support the Zionist cause. This is a clip from 2 years ago. There are other clips, like a recent interview with Megyn Kelly in August, where Charlie Kirk is clearly frustrated, visibly frustrated and perturbed at how he has been a defender of Israel, considers himself still a defender of Israel, and yet there is a powerful chorus of stakeholders, leaders in the pro-Israel movement who are not just disagreeing with him, but viciously attacking him and impugning his motivations, calling him an anti-Semite. In other words, Charlie Kirk is saying, is it not good enough that I'm an ally, I'm listening, I've supported you for years? Not only is it not good enough, but now you attack me? You say I'm evil? How dare you? I'm an American. What do you expect this relationship is supposed to be? And so Charlie Kirk seems to be in a moment of candor, venting his very real frustrations. And you can only imagine, Charlie Kirk is a young, extremely powerful, ambitious guy. And for better or for worse, he is an American. Born and raised in Arlington Heights in the suburbs of Chicago, is a Protestant Christian. And while he might have cut deals or made compromises or went with the program before, now that this Israeli agenda is truly coming into conflict with what it means to be an American and a Christian, now he starts to buck the expectations of his foreign patrons or handlers. There's a bit of moxie. There's a little bit of, he seems to be emboldened. If you're a young, powerful guy, you don't want to take orders from people. If you're Charlie Kirk and you're 31 and you got the world on a string, you're the bag man for the GOP, you run with the president, you travel the world, you run the conservative movement, there's a little bit of swagger. There's a little bit of a chip on your shoulder. Does a young man like that want to take orders and be lectured and berated and attacked? Meanwhile, he's getting it from the other side. He's getting every groiper and every 18-year-old asking him about dancing Israelis 100 times a day. I'm sure at that point he's extremely frustrated. And that shined through in his Megyn Kelly interview in early August of this year, just a month ago. People take that as evidence. Just a couple of days before he was gunned down, he interviewed Ben Shapiro. It's actually just the day before. He interviewed Ben Shapiro about the situation in Gaza and asked some interesting leading questions. He asked Shapiro if we can trust what the media says about Israel. He asked if what Israel is doing can be considered an ethnic cleansing. He asked if Israel created a PR problem for themselves in America, and why can't they end the war more quickly? And so people say that there was clearly this public inquiry. If he wasn't taking an explicitly anti-Israel stance, he was signaling. He was becoming candid. He was becoming emboldened. He was venting that he did not like what the Israelis were pushing, and he did not feel like the Israelis had the authority to push him. So there was this quiet rebellion that was happening maybe inside of his interior life. Maybe he was having private conversations with his friends like Steve Bannon and Candace Owens and Dave Smith and others who have intimated that there were similar conversations like this, and that this was starting to express itself outwardly in these media appearances. What's more, famously, At his SAS Student Leadership Conference in the summer this year, he hosted a debate on Israel between one of the Israeli Zionist propagandists, Josh Hammer from Newsweek, and Dave Smith, who was calling Israel warmongering, genocidal maniacs at a Turning Point conference. He hosted Tucker Carlson. And at this conference, they both admitted that Jeffrey Epstein was a Mossad agent. That's the public evidence. There's also private evidence of a revelation. Privately, there is a piece by Max Blumenthal at the Gray Zone. This is the only source for it. Max Blumenthal, a Jewish leftist at the Gray Zone, has reported that private sources, anonymous sources, allegedly friends of Charlie Kirk, have come forward since his death. And they say that Charlie Kirk was becoming afraid. He did disagree with the Israel lobby on the Iran policy, on the Gaza policy. He wanted to go against the program, but he was afraid. The Israelis were not happy with him. They were offering him money. He turned it down. They invited him to Israel. He turned that down too. They talk about a meeting in August where Bill Ackman, a billionaire Jewish donor who is connected to Israel and Jeffrey Epstein, they say that Bill Ackman effectively gave him a ultimatum. This is how this is being characterized. I'm not claiming this, but Candace Owens and Max Blumenthal have characterized this meeting based on conversations they had with him and other attendees of the meeting, that in early August, Charlie Kirk met with Bill Ackman, a Jewish billionaire, and others like Seth Dillon of the Babylon Bee, Josh Hammer, and they staged what they characterize as an intervention where they berated Charlie Kirk for his resistance to the pro-Israel agenda. And they say that Charlie Kirk felt as though he might be blackmailed in the future, that they were going to play dirty. And so there is this narrative that Charlie Kirk, although we know him as in the pocket for Israel, he was clearly a willing and complicit client of the Israel lobby for his entire career. They say that, like all of us, based on recent developments, which are a true inflection point in America and Israel's relationship, that he, like everybody, was starting to get sick of the Israeli capture and Israeli influence over our government. Did not agree that we should go to war with Iran, did not agree that children should be genocided in Gaza, and was getting sick of defending it. He was signaling that in public. He was openly discussing it in private. And it seems that the Israelis were becoming increasingly frustrated and intimidating and menacing and threatening. And what started out as offers to buy him turned into potentially intimidation and threats. And they say evolved ultimately into a bullet. They eliminated him because they realized they couldn't control him. That is the narrative. And this is a story from the Gray Zone. I will read the important parts of it to you. This is what they characterize as the moment when Charlie Kirk was intimidated. It says, quote, "The Gray Zone has spoken to 5 people with intimate knowledge of Charlie Kirk's meeting with Bill Ackman, which was held in early August. According to one source, Kirk was left upset after the gathering turned into an intervention where he was hammered for his increasingly skeptical views on the U.S. relationship with Israel and for platforming prominent conservative critics of Israel at his Turning Point events. Since publishing the report, the Gray Zone has learned from one attendee of the Hamptons event that Ackman convened the influencers under the auspices of a discussion about Zohran Mamdani and the supposed threat that he posed to the West if elected mayor of New York. But the meeting went off the rails when Ackman personally confronted Kirk about his views on Israel. An unknown British woman joined in the argument and began screaming at Kirk, according to the attendee. When his host presented him with a detailed list of every offense he supposedly committed against Israel, Kirk was horrified, said one attendee. Ackman also allegedly demanded that Kirk rescind his invitation for Tucker Carlson to speak at the upcoming America Fest 2025 in December. The Gray Zone reported on September 12th, citing a longtime associate of Kirk, that Netanyahu had offered to organize a massive infusion of pro-Israel money into Turning Point, and that Kirk refused. Another longtime friend of Kirk has told the Gray Zone that the conservative activist also rejected an offer Netanyahu delivered 2 weeks before his death to meet with him in Jerusalem. Kirk, according to one person with inside knowledge of the meeting with Ackman, said he left feeling as though he'd been subjected to blackmail. In a series of text messages, Ackman described his account of the meeting with Kirk as totally false. He pledged to release a public statement providing his own account of the event, but refused to clarify any further details. He said, "I can easily put this to bed. I have receipts," but he did not abide when asked to provide the receipts to the reporters. So this is some of the substantiating evidence. They say, and these are really the two big things, they're two separate things. They say that Charlie Kirk was offered an infusion of $150 million by Israel. Okay? That would double Israel's budget, or excuse me, Turning Point USA's budget. Turning Point USA has an annual budget of $140 million. Netanyahu offered Turning Point $150 million. For one purpose and one purpose only, to shill for Israel harder. Turning Point USA is already pro-Israel. They're not anti-Israel. They've never been anti-Israel. Charlie Kirk has, in the past, criticized Bibi Netanyahu. He has criticized secular left-wing Jewry in America. He has criticized a war with Iran, the famine in Gaza. He has never opposed Israel in itself. He has never explicitly opposed Israel. Israel offered him $150 million to be more pro-Israel than they already were, to be harder in their support for Israel, and in particular, to support regime change in Iran and to support their ethnic cleansing and genocide in Gaza. And Charlie Kirk refused the money. And I have independently confirmed that, by the way. I've heard that from 4 people. 4 people that I trust that are in the know. So this is coming from Candace Owens, a friend of Charlie Kirk. This is coming from Max Blumenthal, who purports to have a source. And I have heard from a handful of people independently of those sources that this offer was real and that Kirk turned down the money. After Charlie Kirk turned down the money, Netanyahu asked if he would come visit Jerusalem and give him the re-education tour. The Holocaust Museum, the burned babies, the beheaded babies, the one that Elon Musk took, the one that our Speaker of the House took. Anyone that's ever criticized Israel has been subjected to. He refused that as well. They offered to bribe him. They tried to re-educate him. He refused both offers. That's 1. 2, they say Bill Ackman, the Jewish pro-Israel billionaire, hosted this event at his house in the Hamptons where they staged an intervention. And he, along with other pro-Israel mouthpieces, pro-Israel traitors and shills, berated and screamed at him for not supporting Israel enough. And whatever they say about it, whatever other people say about it, Charlie Kirk's friends intimate that he felt scared. He felt as though he was being intimidated and blackmailed potentially. Well, he's dead now, so he can't tell us what really went down. All we know is what the people who berated him allegedly felt about it, but we don't know his perspective. Now, since this report has been published, Bill Ackman has responded on Twitter, and I'll read his response in full because we have to rigorously analyze all the facts. This is what he says. He said, quote, "I connected with Charlie when he DM'd me in late May of this year and expressed interest in meeting me. We were unable to find a time to meet, so we scheduled a Zoom on June 11th. So Charlie texted Bill Ackman first. They got on a Zoom in June. Charlie explained to me that young conservatives were getting tired of defending Israel, and this was very concerning. He suggested it might be useful to convene a group of young conservative influencers on a host of topics that could include Israel to get a better sense of how the community was thinking about Israel and other relevant issues. He suggested that recruiting a group of junior Charlie Kirks who could host open mic sessions on college campuses could be an effective way to encourage debate. We thereafter scheduled a series of conference calls and Zooms with Charlie, Turning Point, and members of my team in an effort to assemble a diverse group of influencers so that we could convene for a day-and-a-half session. We chose the afternoon of August 4th. And Charlie and members of my team worked to put together an invitation list. I offered to host the sessions in Bridgehampton and cover the costs so that I could attend some of the sessions. Charlie sent out the invitations and about 35 or so influencers accepted. Charlie estimated that the influencers who attended collectively had more than 100 million followers. Charlie and Turning Point put together the agenda for the meeting. Charlie asked me to moderate the economic future discussion, which I did, and I thereafter hosted a Q&A session with the participants. The discussion of the convergence of East and West included a discussion of immigration value systems, the U.S. approach to foreign policy, and Israel. While I wanted to attend that panel, I had a board meeting that conflicted with that session. Those who attended that session said that the Israel discussion was similar to the others, with attendees expressing varying points of view as well as explaining the views of their followers. Some were critical of Israel and others were supportive. The sessions are punctuated by meals. I attended one group lunch and a dinner where I sat with Charlie and others. At the end of the event, I sat with Charlie and members of my team, and we discussed the events of the convening. Charlie believed he had identified a number of potential Turning Point ambassadors who could launch open mic events on campus, and that he would follow up with them. We agreed to keep in touch thereafter. We corresponded by text over the next few weeks on a range of topics, not including Israel, and the next thing I knew, he was gone. In short, this was not an intervention to blackmail Charlie Kirk. It was nothing of that sort. Candace replied and said, Candace Owens, she said, I was clear Charlie felt blackmailed by the offer to fund Turning Point, which he refused, not that you, Bill Ackman, blackmailed Charlie Kirk. She said people in attendance described it as an intervention. Josh Hammer and Seth Dillon were disappointed that Charlie was frustrated with Bibi Netanyahu and what would happen if he publicly criticized him. Nothing else in your response disputes that Charlie was pressed by you and others about his viewpoints on Israel and about Tucker or Bibi's phone call. As a follow-up, do you know anything about the alleged $150 million Bibi offered for an anti-Tucker campaign? Now, Candace's response, if you've been following this, let's just piece it together quickly. So Blumenthal and Candace are claiming that Bill Ackman corners Charlie Kirk in an intervention at his house in August for a struggle session. And people are screaming at Charlie Kirk, and Charlie Kirk there's this climate of fear. And what is intimated is that there is some menacing here. The message is you better get in line. It's hostile. It's over the top. There's an intervention. They're telling him you better ship up or shape out. You better support Israel or else. That is how this is characterized by Blumenthal and by Candace Owens. What Bill Ackman puts forth is that actually Charlie initiated contact with him. Charlie and he set up the event. Charlie and he arranged the venue and invited the influencers. Charlie had very little FaceTime with Ackman. And Ackman says that the Israel session was similar to all the others. Now, these are two completely different accounts. One, by Blumenthal and Candace, is filled with insinuations and is not telling the whole story. It's almost like a dreamlike characterization. You never know how you get in the middle of a dream. You just wake up and you're there. So they say Charlie happens to be at this event. Apparently it's an ambush. It was supposed to be one thing. It turns into an intervention. People are screaming. He's afraid. They're telling him, get in line or else. Well, Bill Ackman answered the charge. And he said, on the contrary, this was not a random event that Charlie happened to come to where we staged an ambush. Charlie reached out to Ackman. Charlie and Ackman set up the event. It was a Turning Point event. It was funded by Ackman, but Charlie made the guest list. The point was to groom influencers to be Turning Point representatives. Ackman didn't attend most of it. Apparently, it was cordial. Some were pro-Israel, some were critical of Israel, and discussions of Israel was on the docket. It's not like they caught him off guard. That was part of the routine. When Candace replies to the correction, she effectively concedes all of that and says, well, some woman was screaming. She says that people were disappointed. She said, for example, that Seth Dillon and Josh Hammer were especially disappointed at Kirk's views. Well, wouldn't they be? They're extreme Zionists, but expressing disappointment is different than menacing. It was characterized in the Gray Zone piece and in Candace's show like they were bringing down, they were pointing a gun at him. Like they didn't say that, but the characterization is that this was an intervention. There was a culture of fear. There was an implicit threat. That's how they insinuated this went down. It was an ambush. In reality, it was not an ambush. If anything, Charlie knew what he was getting himself into. They said they were screaming and berating. Now Candace concedes, well, these Zionists who were invited by Charlie were disappointed. Well, I mean, wouldn't they be? She says, well, I never said you blackmailed him. I said he felt blackmailed about something else. Okay, well, seemed like you insinuated that, but that's subjective. She says, in any way, this is really about the phone call with Netanyahu and Kirk. Okay, so if you're only, think of this. You have two separate accounts. Candace and Max Blumenthal are characterizing this one way. Bill Ackman is laying out the facts with dates, and he says Charlie sent the first text. This is when he texted me. This is when we called. This is who set it up. This is where it took place. This is how many people came. This is who came. These were the discussion sections. This is how long we talked, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. She didn't dispute any of that. She didn't dispute any of those details. So she's effectively conceding that, yes, Bill Ackman gave an accurate account. And that just sounds like a regular run-of-the-mill fundraiser. That sounds like a regular run-of-the-mill political get-together where tactical and ideological disagreements are discussed, but it's overall cordial, and it's not some big catastrophe or something. She didn't dispute any of those details other than to say, well, but wouldn't you say that Josh Hammer was disappointed? Okay, but Josh Hammer is like on the payroll of the Israelis. You might as well say that Netanyahu is disappointed that Charlie Kirk criticized Netanyahu. It comes with the territory. That's different than people screaming, people berating, an intervention. That's the only detail that she had any qualms with, and then very quickly pivots to what about the phone call? Now, so I have a big problem with that because that's dishonest. Blumenthal and Candace, unless they produce receipts, unless they produce evidence to the contrary, it seems like they mischaracterized that meeting entirely. It seems like they lied about that they were at the minimum disingenuous because, again, two very different portrayals. One had actual information. The other seemed to rely on insinuation and implication. And when the facts came out, none of the facts were disputed. So unless Blumenthal or Candace can produce receipts to the contrary, it seems like they got caught with their hand in the cookie jar. And I watched Candace's show in full. I read the piece in the Gray Zone. And Bill Ackman's account of that event, it just devastates the implications they made about it. And unless they can refute the facts that he provided, it seems like they intentionally were disingenuous in characterizing the event. And then when they got caught, Candace pivoted to the other thing. Like I said, there's two things. There's Netanyahu offering $150 million to buy them out, and then there's this seemingly innocuous meeting. Now, why didn't you lead with the phone call? If the big evidence is that Netanyahu made this offer and the meeting was really secondary or ancillary or not what it's cracked up to be, why'd you even bring that up? That hurts your credibility. That hurts the credibility of the case because very clearly they're not telling the whole story there, and Bill Ackman is. Or he's telling parts of it that they did not. But let's talk about the $150 million because to me, this is a big problem. Let's briefly talk about the predicament that Israel is in. Israel, as stated by the ADL and by their own representatives, has a generational problem. They don't have an ideological problem, they have a generational problem. It's not that the left hates them, it's not that the right hates them, it's that the young people are becoming indifferent to the cause of Israel. The left is overwhelmingly, at this point, pro-Palestine, more so than they are pro-Israel. The younger generation in particular is radical. They believe that Israel is a settler colonial state. They're carrying out an ethnic cleansing. They're genocidal. The left wing is radicalized. They are enthusiastic. They are angry. Needless to say, Israel has lost the left, and they've especially lost the youth on the left. But on the right, increasingly, it's not much better. They still have the boomers, and they still have the millennials to some degree. But the Zoomers are becoming completely apathetic about Israel. They do not care. They're becoming indifferent. And many of them are becoming anti-Israel. Now, that is something that poses an existential threat to Israel. Because this Generation Z on the right and the left, they will grow up. They will go to the selective schools. They will graduate those schools. They will enter the pipeline in the State Department, in the top positions in the elite fields in our country, in finance, in law, in media, and they will not be sympathetic to Israel. And when that happens, Israel will lose its most important patron. So that spells a big problem for them. Because what you need to understand about Israel and our special relationship, if you understand nothing else, is this. Much has been said about our special relationship, our closest ally, and how conspicuous this is and how unique it is, for better or for worse. But what you need to understand, if nothing else, is that America is indispensable to Israel. America is inseparable with Israel. In many ways, America and Israel are literally inextricable. They cannot be separated one from the other. And this is by design. It has been this way from the beginning. Israel could not have been settled, founded, defended, maintained, would not have survived without unconditional, constant, overwhelming support from America for over 100 years. Now, people say Israel was declared in 1948. It goes back further than that. It goes back further than that. Without the American Jewish community supporting the Zionist project, even in the first half of the 20th century, there would be no Israeli state. It has been like this from the beginning. America is indispensable to Israel. And why? Because when Israel was fighting its Arab neighbors, America was legally and illegally providing the conventional weapons, the nuclear weapons. When Israel was faced with foes like Saddam Hussein and Bashar al-Assad and Muammar Gaddafi, the United States was fighting the wars Israel could not win. When the international community began to turn against Israel and its occupation of the West Bank and Gaza, the United States vetoed the Security Council resolutions condemning it. The United States is indispensable for Israel's survival. And have you ever noticed that that is the lingo that they use? Israel has a right to exist. Israel has a right to defend itself. That is the dogma. It has a right to exist. It has a right to defend itself. Well, if America is indispensable to Israel's existence and Israel's self-defense, then that means that Israel is entitled to American support. Do you understand how that works? If Israel has a right to exist, but its existence is contingent on American support, then that means that Israel has a right to American support. If Israel's self-defense is absolutely contingent on American support, then it has a right to American support. And what kind of system do we have in America? An open society, a democracy, a liberal society, some might say an oligarchy, a capitalist society. For Israel to secure this existential support, this indispensable support from America, they must secure influence over America's system, over its democracy, over its government, over its society. And how does it do that? It must regulate broadcasting and dissemination of information. Because as long as people vote and as long as candidates are staged for the political parties, then American citizens still have some sovereignty and some say in what the government does. So it's not enough that the Israelis penetrate our government and Wall Street and other things. They must penetrate the media and regulate the medium. That's where media comes from. The medium of the dissemination of information. They must control the broadcasting of information. How do you control these elections, our open society, our democratic government? By controlling the minds of the masses through the public square, through the centralized mass media, which was television, radio, and print, and is now social media. And if Israel has a right to exist and its existence is contingent on support from America, then they see it as their right to control and influence and manipulate our system. Understand that logical progression? And think about these questions of survival. Do you take your survival seriously? Do you take the survival of your wife and kids seriously? Would you do anything to protect your wife and kids from destruction? Would you lie, cheat, steal? Would you kill to defend and protect yourself, your wife, and your children? Of course you would. Now, what is the mindset of the Zionists? What is the mindset of Jews? I know that sounds a certain way, but this is a fairly obvious question. I'll tell you what the mindset is. They have been persecuted for 2,000 years. The Romans put them down in a series of rebellions and killed thousands of them, according to their narrative, expelled them from their land. And for 2,000 years, they were forced to dwell in exile, being chased from one kingdom to another, facing inquisitions, segregation, facing cruelty, discrimination, prejudice, hatred, pogroms, massacres, the Holocaust. So they founded Israel, a place where they can finally be safe, where they would never live in fear of extermination, being at the mercy of a hostile totalitarian regime, where they could exist, where they could thrive. Now, stay with me here, it follows. If you as an individual would lie, cheat, steal, maybe kill to protect yourself and the ones you love, put yourself in the mindset of the leaders and the stakeholders of the Jewish community. Would they lie, cheat, steal, and kill to protect their race? To protect their people? Think about their story. They see themselves as the vanguard of God, of God's law given to Moses, in the Torah, in the oral tradition, in the mystic tradition, they see themselves as the vanguard of God, of God's word, of God's law. They see themselves as repairing the world, putting the shards containing God together to save the world. And their story is of slavery at the hands of the Egyptians, captivity at the hands of the Babylonians, persecutions, pogroms, genocide. When they say we have a right to exist, we have a right to defend ourselves, that's a battle cry. And it says we will do anything. We feel entitled. We have a right to anything. And you think a couple of Europeans are going to stand in our way? You think some punk from Arlington Heights? You think some Spanish government, some Irish government? You think the Western Europeans? You think American conservatives? You think skinhead, trailer trash Nazis? Whatever they say about us, you think they're going to stand in the way of us? We take what we want. We say what will help us. We kill who opposes us. When they say they have a right to exist, they're saying we have a right to control American society, to secure our existence. Now, if the youth are being lost, this poses an existential problem to Israel. And if in particular, the youth in the right wing of America becomes indifferent to Israel, then they are truly alone. They have lost China, Russia, the whole Muslim world, Europe, Africa, Latin America. Who do they got? It's just us. And what is America's support conditioned upon? The Republican constituency in America. If we're up to the Democrats, we wouldn't support Israel. If it was up to the Zoomers, we wouldn't support Israel. It's Republican boomers that are keeping it together. Without America, they are alone. And without the boomers, they don't have America. So they need the young people in America. They need the right wing in America. Do you think that's why Netanyahu offered Charlie Kirk $150 million to support Israel? Do you think that's why it mattered to them so much? Netanyahu was going to open the floodgates, according to these reports, and unleash $150 million of Israel-controlled money that would probably come from America. It wouldn't come from the Israeli treasury. It wouldn't come from their finance ministry. Netanyahu would order it, and it would be Jewish American billionaires that actually dispense the cash. He would double their money. Do you know how much money $150 million cash is? Charlie Kirk would overnight become a very rich man. He could be president. He could be kingmaker. He was offered a deal. All you got to do is work for Israel, work for the genocidal state that is subverting our sovereignty and our country. And why was it of such great importance to Israel? Because they knew that if they had Charlie Kirk, they would have the young right-wing men. Because Charlie Kirk, he's not just a live streamer. On the contrary, he's not just a debater. Charlie Kirk has a personal relationship with Trump. Charlie Kirk is the bag man for the GOP. And Charlie Kirk runs the largest youth organization for the conservatives in America. So he's a very powerful man. He's a very important piece on the board. If you got Charlie, you got the young, you got the money, and you got Trump's ear. Maybe you're a kingmaker. Excuse me. Maybe you're a kingmaker in 2028. That's why it was worth $150 million to Netanyahu. So they offered to give him all this money. He declined because he knew the money came with strings attached. That was a double or nothing. Look, the Zionists gave him all this money thus far. He's having doubts. Well, we will sweep aside those doubts by dropping literally a pallet of cash. Double or nothing. Will you work for us? Yes or no? He said no. They said, come to Israel, meet with me. Charlie Kirk said no. Now he's dead. Now, what about Bill Ackman? What about Bill Ackman and his fundraiser in August? Who the fuck is Bill Ackman? Bill Ackman is a Wall Street Jewish billionaire. Do you know that he is friends with Larry Fink, the head of BlackRock, the largest asset manager in the world, managing $10 trillion in assets? Do you know that Larry Fink is going to run the World Economic Forum in the stead of Klaus Schwab, who's retiring after a Me Too scandal? Do you know that Bill Ackman got the president of Harvard University fired because there was an anti-Israel protest on the Harvard campus? Do you know that Bill Ackman's wife is Israeli? She was born in Israel. And not only that, but she received money from none other than Jeffrey Epstein. And after October 7th, Bill Ackman shifted to the right. He put $1 million behind Trump and became very active in Republican politics, even though he's a lifelong Democrat. Bill Ackman hosted the the convention on August 4th or 5th of Turning Point Influencers. Here's the smoking gun that really brings it all home. Because, and I'm going to be really honest with you, when people said that Israel was behind Charlie Kirk's assassination, I said, don't be ridiculous. Charlie Kirk, and rest in peace, God bless his soul, Charlie Kirk, we all know, was supported by pro-Israel Jewish patrons. Until the day that he died, he never recanted his support for Israel. Publicly and openly, he defended the administration's cover-up of the Epstein files. He defended the administration's bombing of Iran. In the same interview with Megyn Kelly, he said, "You're never going to lose me. I will always support Israel." Be that as it may, after Netanyahu offered to give him all this money, and he refused, Bill Ackman hosted an event at his home where Israeli mouthpieces like Seth Dillon, a Jew, and Josh Hammer, a Jew Israeli mouthpiece working for Ben Shapiro in a previous job listing. Charlie Kirk refused to listen. He was offered a trip to Israel. He refused. When the FBI could not locate the alleged gunman on Wednesday, do you know who stepped up and offered a $1 million reward for information leading to the arrest of Charlie Kirk's assassin? Bill Ackman. And just who do you think that $1 million will be paid out to? It looks like it will be paid out to the alleged killer's father. Tyler Robinson was allegedly turned into law enforcement by his father. His Mormon father, the Mormon father who turned in his gay son dating a tranny who killed Charlie Kirk, is going to get a $1 million payout from Bill Ackman, the man who, according to friends of Charlie Kirk, menaced him for not taking Netanyahu's money and supporting Israel's war in Iran. Do you think Bill Ackman is just generous? He's a vigilante? Put another way, the Jewish billionaire that allegedly threatened Charlie Kirk, the Jewish billionaire married to an Israeli who took money from Jeffrey Epstein, who is, by all credible observations, working on behalf of Israel in some context. The guy that apparently menaced Charlie Kirk is the same guy who will pay a man $1 million for turning in his gay son, implicating him in the murder of Charlie Kirk. Anybody find that a little bit suspicious? This is a tweet, a real tweet that Bill Ackman put out last week. He said, quote, "A number of people have reached out and or posted expressing concern that Tyler Robinson's father may collect a $1.2 million reward for turning in his son," which inspires a few thoughts. First, in order for rewards to be effective in finding criminals, the rewards need to be paid even if the recipient is a crook or worse. That said, in this case, if the father is found to have been involved or otherwise acted negligently in contributing to Charlie's death, civil litigation or criminal prosecution will reverse unjust compensation. I've also seen reports that suggest Tyler's family intends to waive its right to any reward. So yes, we will pay the reward if it is earned to whomever the FBI indicates provided the information that led to Tyler's arrest. To me, that might be the smoking gun. That might be the connection that slipped everybody's attention. So Bill Ackman allegedly menaced Charlie Kirk over Israel. Now Bill Ackman is paying $1 million to a Mormon man turning in his gay son dating a tranny, implicating him in the killing of Charlie Kirk. I see a bit of a conflict of interest there. Now, with that being said, I'm not running with that. I'm not stating that as fact. I'm saying that requires careful scrutiny. It's not, at the minimum, there is the appearance of impropriety. That's not a good look. And that needs to be investigated. And I credit that observation to Arthur Bloom, who's being investigated in Virginia for calling somebody an Israeli spy. Go figure. He put me onto this. I'm not going to pretend I came up with it myself. But at the minimum, that needs to be investigated. And I'd be very interested if the father receives that payout. If he doesn't, then maybe there's nothing there. But I find that to be very conspicuous. Now, we're running out of time. I don't know if I'll be able to get to the Groyper angle. Maybe I'll talk about that tomorrow. I didn't anticipate spending 2 hours on all of this. We haven't even gotten into the super chats here yet. But that is the official story. That is the Israeli conspiracy. And as I said, I will leave it to you to draw your own conclusions. I continue to be convinced that it is probably more likely from where we're sitting now that Charlie was killed by some leftist. But we don't know that. We do not know that. And all these inconsistencies and discrepancies, these things need to be explained to us. And whether Israel was behind the killing or not, we have to get to the bottom of this alleged payment. And I would implore Candace Owens, release all the receipts. You have to release all the receipts immediately. Don't play games. Do not play games. If you have receipts, you need to release them fast. And the reason you need to release them is because they have time to put together their alibi. They have time to put together their story. Do not drag it out for the sake of your show. You know, I watched her show today and I was honestly disappointed. She promised receipts. We have seen no receipts from Max Blumenthal or Candace Owens. We've seen a lot of hearsay, unnamed sources, anonymous friends of Charlie Kirk. If Netanyahu offered $150 million and he turned it down, we need to see the documentation, if there is such a thing. If Charlie Kirk sent a letter to Netanyahu resisting his advance, we need to know the contents of that letter. If there is information to the contrary, we need to see it immediately. You cannot withhold that information. I did not know Charlie. I never worked for Turning Point or Daily Wire or Fox News, so I do not have this privileged insider information from the Jewish Club. But if anybody has that information, it must be released. If you have receipts, you can't play games and say, we've got the documentation. You better release it or else. No. Doesn't work that way. You need to put the information out. Otherwise, it's irresponsible. And we need to get to the bottom of this. And by the way, we all need to demand that our Trump government, they have to get to the bottom of this. If it was Israel, if it was leftists, we need to know what threat we face. If Charlie Kirk is being gunned down for not taking money from a foreign state to support their war, that's a problem. If Charlie Kirk got gunned down by a terrorist cell of insane left-wing trannies, we need to know that too. And what we're getting from the government is not good enough. Trump is playing golf. Kash Patel is at dinner. They don't seem to know what they're doing. Trump is posting on Truth Social about football. Allegedly, one of his close friends, one of his important allies, is laying dead. And we don't know the killer, and we have no idea what's going on. There could be reprisals. There could be copycats. Where's the leadership? Where's the press conferences? And by the way, I am sick and tired of seeing the worst governor in America, Governor Cox from Utah, this pro-trans, left-wing, anti-Trump scumbag, constantly jumping in front of the cameras and giving campaign speeches. I have had enough of him. This country did not elect that dirtbag. This country elected Trump to appoint a DOJ and an FBI director that would get to the bottom of things like this. And where are they? See you in Valhalla? F you. Posting about the NFL rules? F you. Where's our vengeance? If we can't get justice from the government, you're going to get vengeance from the people, and it's going to be ugly. And I don't want to see that. I'm not encouraging that. That's not a threat. That is an observation. If you deprive the people of justice, if the enemies of society are not deterred by the government, there will be more bloodshed. And we're just not getting it. Where is the leadership? Where's the messaging? Where's the information? Where is the whole of government effort to get to the bottom of this, keep the American public apprised, to deter future attacks, and to ensure that this will not happen again? Where is it? And shame on all of the Trump shills for not calling this out. They will praise anything. The Cracker Barrel logo, the Department of War, the Gulf of America. And honestly, I was, and I'm not just trying to politicize this, but I was genuinely disturbed by Trump's reaction to Charlie Kirk's death. Isn't this your friend? They asked him about it the day after, and he said, yeah, anyway, so we're building the new East Wing. Are you serious? You got shot. This is your 31-year-old friend who supported you for years. You know him by name. Your son is friends with him. It doesn't seem like he could be bothered. He didn't go to the memorial. He's golfing. He's dancing at a sports outing. He said he got the news about Charlie Kirk. Oh, and I was in the middle of building the beautiful new ballroom. Really, man? What a disaster. So it's not actually my job or Candace Owens' job or Max Blumenthal or it's not our job to get to the bottom of arguably the worst political assassination in America in the century. It's the job of our elected leaders, our appointed leaders, the head of the FBI and DOJ. I'm sorry, wasn't Kash Patel supposed to be on the money, no pun intended? Wasn't he supposed to be the MAGA FBI director that would clean house? Wasn't it supposed to be different? What is going on? Enough is enough already. It is ridiculous. And they're wheeling out this douchebag in front of us, giving campaign speeches about unity. You know, Governor Cox, go fuck yourself. I don't want to see you anymore. I want to see the president. I want to see the FBI director. I want to see the attorney general. I want to hear a plan. I want to hear a message. I want to know that the enemies of society are going to be investigated and brought to justice, whoever they are. And not the least bit for politics, you'd think at the minimum, because this is a friend of the president, but I guess even that means nothing. So, as it stands, we don't know. And regardless of whether Israel is implicated or not, at the minimum, this shines a spotlight on how this society works. And whether they kill them or not, it's scary that we don't even know, isn't it? We all know they're capable. We all know they're willing. We all see the motive. And the motive is a ground war in Iran and an ethnic cleansing of Gaza. It's deadly serious. And the last thing I'll say is this. For all these people that say, I don't care about the Middle East. Who cares about Gaza? Who cares about Israel? Is that the only thing you can talk about? What about immigration? What about everything else? I care about America. And I'm going to say this respectfully to people like Matt Walsh, who extended an olive branch, it seems. I'm going to say this respectfully because I've heard Matt Walsh and Michael Knowles and their ilk. I've heard them say this, and I'm going to assume that maybe they don't know better, and I'll be respectful how I say this. You may not take an interest in Israel, but Israel takes an interest in you. Israel takes an interest in you and every American. As long as we have a voice in America, as long as we have a vote in America, as long as we Americans have a say over our lives and our society and our government and what it does with its money and its military, and as long as that is indispensable to helping this country evade accountability for its actions, they will take an interest in you and your family and what you have to say and how you vote and even what you think. So you may not care that much about Israel, and you may think that's one issue among others, and that doesn't matter, and we need to just get off that subject and talk about domestic issues, but they don't see it that way. They take an interest in you, and you must realize our country is besieged on all sides by foreign intelligence and manipulation. And in some ways, that's the only issue there is. That's politics. What if it was a tranny? What if it was some random tranny? Think about what a sick fucking joke that is. You have Charlie Kirk, a moderate Christian conservative, and some enraged tranny with Mormon parents gunning one another down. And it's not one another, but you understand. Meanwhile, the Senate voted not to release the Epstein files. Meanwhile, Congress gave another $650 million to Israel. Meanwhile, Israel bombed Qatar and is gearing up. The tanks are rolling through Gaza City, and they're getting ready for a war with Iran. So congratulations, you fucking idiot leftists. Congratulations, you stupid fucking faggots. And I say that somewhat affectionately. Congratulations, LGBT leftists or whatever. You shot some moderate conservative. Meanwhile, our country's being raped. Congrats. Good job. Now everybody's focused on internecine. Now we're doing the culture war. Now it's Christian parents fighting with their gay kids about fucking porn. Meanwhile, we have no independence. We have no sovereignty. So, you know, and here's the funny part. If there is, it's funny in a sick way. Here's the ironic part. Over the past few months, I have been making a concerted effort to unify liberals and conservatives. I really have. I tried. I really made a concerted effort to speak in a language that liberals might understand. I tried to demonstrate my objectivity. I tried to bring liberals into the fold. I tried to appeal to their animosity, their legitimate criticisms of Trump, their legitimate animosity towards Israel. I leaned out of the culture war intentionally. When a tranny shot up the school in Minneapolis, because it was the truth, but also out of sensitivity, I said, let's not blame the left or trannies. Let's look at this as nihilism, because I genuinely feel that's what it is. And you know what Hassan Piker said? He said, oh, this guy's just lying. He's cynical. And then glorifies violence against conservatives. Hey, Hassan, you idiot. Hassan, Destiny, hey, idiots. Do you know that this Zionist-backed Republican government would love nothing more? They're waiting, they're begging for the opportunity, for a reason to wipe the far left off the map. And not for the reason you think. Not because you support trans rights, but because the leftists protest Israel. Okay? That's why. Alex Karp is making products for Israel to murder people in Gaza. They are waiting, begging for an excuse to whip up the far right into a frenzy and to create a mandate to bring the government down on the far left. And you just gave them what they wanted. And instead, like your uncle, Cenk, instead, like your uncle of recognizing that, you play right into their hands. Right into their hands. Because you just can't get your mind off of sex. Because for the far left, those are the only issues that exist. Trans rights and gay marriage. Forget about, immigration, forget about healthcare, forget about what's happening in Ukraine and Israel. So nice going. Nice job. And it may be a leftist, and, the left is, they have their problems also. But it's just a little bit of perspective there. It's not to say the left doesn't exist. It's not to say they don't have nut jobs that want to kill us. Obviously, they do. But you must recognize that we, and by we, do not mistake what I mean. We as American patriots, we as God-fearing Christians, people that actually love the living person, Jesus Christ on the cross, we are fighting a multi-front war against a sophisticated adversary. Do not for one second think it's all or nothing, right versus left, or Christians versus Jews, or America first versus Israel first. This is a multifaceted war. And the right position is we can't have all these illegal immigrants here. We can't have black super predators stabbing people to death. We can't have left-wing nut jobs burning vigils of Charlie Kirk and wanting to murder conservatives. And we can't have Israel running our country. And that's an agenda I think people can get behind if we can just put forward a candidate, a party, a movement that says all the above. And I'm willing to compromise on other things, but that needs to be the ticket. You want this country to be stable? We need borders. You want this country to be affordable and economical? We need fucking law enforcement. You want the country to stay together? We can't have political violence like this. We can't have radicals egging on and glorifying terrorism, obviously. And if we want to be a nation, if we want independence, we have to stand up to Israel and resist the division that they don't create, but which they exacerbate. And the only way to overcome that, I'll reiterate my call last week, we must be not just innocent, not just merciful, not just forgiving, benevolent, magnanimous, charitable. Not just those things, but we must be those things. We must also be wise, clever, cunning, smart. Do you understand? We must be both. And you can be both. We can be humane. We can be loving. We must be those things. We can be charitable towards our enemies. We can let God's love shine through us. It doesn't mean we need to be suckers. We need to be cunning too, for our sake and for the sake of our families. We're in a multi-front war. We need to destroy the left, the radical left that seeks to murder us. We need to make our country safe. We need to keep the Israeli foreign influence out of our country. It's a multi-front war. And the consensus needs to be against them both. It needs to be against these sicko freak nihilists that are okay seeing the country get invaded and people get murdered for no reason and people get shot for their opinions, and also against the people that are doing that same thing in Gaza. We need something like a Christian right wing and liberal fusion against the, they want to rally conservatives against the woke left and the Muslims. I want to rally liberals and conservatives against the radical far left and against the Zionists that want to influence America. That's the ticket. And it's not going to be this Cracker Barrel, nicky-knack, conservative culture war slop. And it's also not going to be this third worldism either. Anyway, so that's that. But I do want to move on. We're going to take a look at our super chats. We'll see what you guys have to say, but this is why I'm demanding accountability. This Trump government needs to give us the answers. Until then, we must be very vigilant. And, Sam Hyde said this today, and he said this in his video. I think Sam Hyde's video was remarkable. It's the last thing I'll say. He said, we really must be cautious. And I'll reiterate that. We must be cautious and tread carefully, lest we be used by the devil, by sophisticated adversaries that might be beyond our comprehension. Let us be prudent. Let us pray for prudence and temperance and caution, and to guard our path, to guide our path, watch our step, so that we, forget about one thing or another. We do not want to be unwitting instruments of the people that seek to oppress us. I'm always more worried about that. Anyway, but that's that. We're going to move on. We'll take a look at our super chats tonight, and we'll see what you have to say.
All right, so this is probably one of the most popular theories that's been floating around on social media, where it's the question of, was Israel and Bibi Netanyahu involved? By now, we've probably seen a lot of the responses that Bibi Netanyahu has been making, even him being asked the question on Newsmax of whether or not he had anything to do with it, and him giving a very non-Bibi Netanyahu response, which he seemed to be shaky, looking down. I think he just was caught off guard more than anything by the question, like almost like the nerve of you to even ask me this question, or nobody told me before the interview that this was going to be asked, because he just looked completely frazzled.
Before I let you go, I want you to address one thing, and it's just the absurdity of it. Some of the internet rumors that somehow Israel is behind the Charlie Kirk murder, and I don't believe it for 1 second, but I want you to make a statement. It's so absurd.
That's insane. That's insane. Israel also changes the orbit of the moon. Israel pushes the sun. I mean, the whole thing it's not only insane. I think it's so absurd, so stupid, and so ridiculous. You can't believe that people are saying this. They just found the perpetrator. They'll get to the bottom of this. But they go, they have no limits. When you hate Jews, when you hate the Jewish state, you're willing to say anything and promote all these absurd rumors. And by the way, they're willing to kill us all the time. I mean, that's what they're doing.
Y'all take that how y'all want to take it. And I'm just observing, all right? I'm just observing. Now, Nick said that he does believe that Israel was involved in previous situations such as JFK Jr.'s death, but that he did not believe, and I believe he said that he found it pretty ridiculous that Israel would be involved in this situation. Now, I don't know if Nick's trying to present it as, I think this is ridiculous. But to be totally honest, after I heard him go through this theory, it seemed like he was more confident. If he was persuading us of one theory or the other. It seems to me that this would be the theory that would be the one that he's trying to persuade us to lean into, even though he started off by saying that the other scenario was the stronger scenario possibility in his mind. So I don't know. And also, I never looked up this dancing Israelis thing. I had no idea what he was talking about. I looked it up, I Googled it, found an FBI report, something that I believe was now released for the public. It's a little spooky. I can't front. It's a little spooky. So I don't know if y'all want to pause the video and go check that out, but definitely check that out. So it seems like Nick is presenting this scenario in a way that I'm not really seeing the entire picture, or I'm not drawing the connection. It's almost like he's thinking that because Nick wanted to debate him and Charlie never would, and the main reason why he wouldn't debate him was based on their thoughts on Israel, that Nick believes that Israel couldn't have been involved, or he just doesn't find it likely. That's what I'm taking away from it. But Nick seems to be leaving out the fact that, and maybe he just may not be aware of it, that Charlie questioned certain things that a super pro-Israeli or super pro-Netanyahu guy would not be questioning. He said certain things right after October 7th on Patrick Bet-David's podcast, where he was questioning whether Israel knew. He found it strange. He was one of the first people coming out saying, like, look, I've been to Israel. There's no way that this type of situation could have happened without their military knowing. They have military everywhere. How did this situation happen? And he didn't seem to be questioning it. It seemed to be more statements, strong statements, things that he wanted to get out very clear and directly.
So I've been to Israel many times. The whole country's a fortress. When I first heard this story, I still have the same gut instinct that I did initially. I find this very hard to believe. I've been to that Gaza border. You cannot go 10 feet without running into a 19-year-old with an AR-15 or an automatic machine gun that is an IDF soldier, right? The whole country is surveilled. And so let me just kind of go through this. We don't talk about Israeli politics very often, and most Americans don't know this. The last 9 months, Israel was on the brink of civil war. It's not an exaggeration. This judicial stuff, there were hundreds of thousands of Israelis taking to the streets because Bibi Netanyahu is basically redefining the Israeli constitution. That's not an exaggeration, right? He said the judicial branch has too much power. There were protests planned this week against Netanyahu, where they anticipated tens of thousands of people to take to the streets. That's all gone, Patrick. Netanyahu now has an emergency government and a mandate to lead. I'm not willing to go so far that saying that Netanyahu knew or there was intelligence here, but I think some questions need to be asked. Was there a stand down order? Was there a stand down order? 6 hours? I don't believe it. Israel's the size of New Jersey. When I took a helicopter ride from Jerusalem to the Gaza border, it's 45 minutes. Wow. 6 hours. They're live streaming the killing of Jews. Did somebody in the government say stand down? That is a legitimate non-conspiracy question. The whole country is the IDF. The whole country is. Yeah. And you're trying to tell me that they're going to concerts and kibbutzes and schools and by reports 6 hours. Let's say it's 3 hours.
That's suspect. Go ahead, Rob.
It's also not like a right-wing reporting. This is from the New York Times. The long wait for help as massacre unfolds in Israel. I can't think of a more liberal news outlet than the New York Times.
And by the way, I'm actually very pro-Israel. So let me be very, so I'm not exactly.
Well, I think we all are.
No, I just want to make sure my position is clear here. But so Patrick, there are other explanations. It's possible that the Netanyahu government was double-crossed by bad agents. Okay? That's dark, but it's not as dark as what we're talking about. Okay? Another aspect is that Netanyahu might have traitors in his government, like legitimate traitors that have infiltrated. I was texting with some senior people in the IDF, and they said, Charlie, can't say too much, but let's just say the same problem you have with the left in America, we have here in Israel. So there's something to think about. Just something to think about, right?
So there have been instances even years ago where Charlie Kirk called out a lot of this stuff. And Nick is calling for people like Candace Owens or others that have information, let it out before people can start making up their narratives and creating stories and misleading people. Put the information out, put the truth out. I also understand that people may not want to let certain truths out because that can be a life-changing thing, letting out information. But if you're going to threaten it, like Nick said, I think he was talking about Candace and some of her conversations with Bill Ackman, which is another interesting thing. But Nick was saying, hey, put out whatever correspondence that you have that can give us some insight on what actually happened and get us closer to the truth in this situation. And the same thing, it's funny, between Nick and Candace, you could tell they have a very big dislike for each other. And I don't even know if it's built on anything with that much substance, but their disdain for each other definitely plays a role, in my opinion, in how they view the other's viewpoint and opinions. It's just something that I noticed, but I don't know. Y'all tell me. All right, so just a couple more points. I thought it was very interesting how Nick was connecting that saying of Israel having the right to exist to pretty much justify America always supporting Israel in whatever they need, whether it's financially or with their military efforts. So if Israel has the right to exist, but its existence is contingent on American support, that means Israel has the right to American support. Now, even that question of Israel having the right to exist, I don't know why so many people seem to be scared to answer that question and answer it in the way that they do. No, Israel doesn't have the right to exist. Just like America doesn't have the right to exist. Like, I think I heard Dave Smith say it, people have the right to exist, not countries in which you conquered another group. And it's like, what gives somebody the right to have a country that you had to kick people off of their land? And if I stopped right there, you wouldn't know whether I'm talking about America. You wouldn't know if I'm talking about Israel. You wouldn't know if I'm talking about a whole bunch of these nations. Most of the land that is determined right now, the nations that are determined right now, came from bloodshed, came from violating God's commandments, right? So how could anybody have the right to exist? Like, what does that even mean? Like, that pretty much justifies anything that has to be done in order to make sure that this country still exists. It's like, wait, what? I've said long before that, no, there's no right to exist for you or anybody else as a country. Now, as an individual, of course, but as a country, no, absolutely not. That means, oh, America has the right to exist. Okay, how do we back into that? How does this country have the right? Oh, well, they had the right to come here and kill the people that were on the land, displace them. How many women and children died? Doesn't matter. They had the right. Like, we become very demonic when we get into that conversation because it justifies us doing evil actions in order to accomplish what? A greater good for you and yours, the conqueror, not the people being conquered, though. And the last thing that I'll leave you with, I'm not going to go too much into the whole Netanyahu, this $150 million allegedly. If that's the case and somebody has the receipts, I'm with Nick. Yo, put it out there. Put it out there. Don't half step with it. Put it out there. If you have information, if you have correspondence, if you have something that can bring some truth and clarity to the situation and perhaps call out some bad actors in this situation, then do that. But as far as Trump, perhaps there has been a lack of leadership in this situation. Perhaps there has been. And Nick pointed out the video where Trump is asked about Charlie Kirk's passing, and he just seems to disregard it.
My condolences to you, sir. My condolences on the loss of your friend Charlie Kirk. May I ask, sir, personally, how are you holding up over the last day and a half, sir?
I think very good. And by the way, right there, you see all the trucks. They've just started construction of the new ballroom for the White House, which is something they've been trying to get, as you know, for about 150 years. And it's going to be a beauty. It'll be an absolutely magnificent structure. And I just see all the trucks. We just started, so it'll get done very nicely, and it'll be one of the best anywhere in the world, actually. Thank you very much.
Your message to young people.
All right, I can't front. That's pretty wild. That was my first time seeing it. That's pretty wild. But once again, people react in strange ways to death. And to be totally honest, if anybody's going to act like that, how Trump responded in a way where it's like, well, look at these other successful things that we have going on. Look, it's going to be Trump. Like, that's kind of his norm. So that's more Trump acting normal, take it however you want to take it, than perhaps if somebody else. Like, if somebody else did that, I would think like, yo, are they deflecting? Is this an issue? With Trump, it's like, oh, he's being insensitive. I wouldn't have just gone from my condolences, sir. How are you feeling after, Charlie Kirk's passing, one of your close friends, to, well, look at this over here. I wouldn't have gone to that, but it's Trump. Not to justify it, and this hopefully doesn't come across as justifying it. It's Trump. He cares about Trump. He cares about his brand. He cares about how people perceive him, all these different things. So to me, that wasn't as strange as it perhaps could have been if it was somebody else. Now, perhaps it's an indictment on his character. I'm not defending that at all, because that is not how I would respond. Hopefully we find out more and more information about this, and more than that, or I don't know if it's more than that, but hopefully we can wake up and realize that there's a need for us to come together, stop being divided, stop allowing ourselves to be conquered like this. It's not a win for anybody. We the people, I should say. It's a win for, and it's not even a win for these elites that are playing chess with us, because they're committing evil work. And that evil, that energy, you put out a certain energy and it typically comes back. So it's not a good look for anybody. Let's just figure out a way to set the standard on how we're going to communicate, build, and interact with one another as far as overall humanity. Because if we don't set that as the standard, it doesn't seem like a lot of other people will. So let's be the change that we want to see. I know that's a recurring theme that we always talk about. All we got to do is be the change that we want to see in the world. And we can make a significant impact. So I'll leave y'all with that. As always, appreciate y'all tapping in. Please give us a like, subscribe to the channel if you like the show, and leave a comment. Definitely appreciate all the love, and I'll see you on the next video.
It's the black guy in the corner, but they'd rather see a on the corner. They say I'm stealing Nick's clips like I'm stealing Nick's chick, not knowing that I hit him first week for the lick. I said, Nick, I could post here while you post there. Let's run the ads up, then let's meet up over there.